Have you ever looked at a political movement that started with the best of intentions and just wondered, how did it all go so wrong? Well, a really provocative essay by Yoon Hae Rook dives right into that question, and today we're going to unpack that exact theory.
So this is the big question the author is trying to answer. It's a total paradox, right? How does this massive, collective desire for a better world, pure goodwill, get so twisted that it ends up becoming the very thing it fought against? The essay lays out this theory of political decay, a path that it argues is dangerously predictable.
All right, let's get into it. We're unpacking one author's specific take on a historical pattern they've noticed. A pattern where the road to tyranny isn't just paved with good intentions. It's actually built on them from the ground up. So where does this idea come from? Well, the author points to modern history. We've seen it time and time again, right? A monarchy or a dictatorship gets overthrown by a popular movement, and these new republics are founded on all this hope and goodwill. But then somehow, they start sliding right back into a new kind of absolute rule. You gotta ask, why does this keep happening?
To try and explain this cycle, the author breaks it down into a 5-stage process. The best way to think about it is like a really slippery slope. Each step down feels kind of logical at the time, but it takes you further and further away from that original noble goal and deeper into something much darker.
Okay, so here they are, the 5 stages. The whole journey kicks off with goodwill, and as you can see, it ends in dictatorship. But the really fascinating and frankly scary part is what happens in the middle. How does each one of these stages manage to poison the next? Let's break them down one by one. It all starts here with goodwill. And this isn't just some fuzzy, vague hope. No, this is a powerful, shared belief that things absolutely can and should be better. You can think of it as the moral fuel that gets revolutions and huge social movements off the ground in the first place. So then, all that potential energy from the goodwill, it starts to get focused. The public channels it, turning it into favor for specific leaders or groups who really seem to embody their hopes. And this favor is not passive at all. We're talking active support, fierce loyalty, and even real sacrifice for the cause. And here we are at stage 3. This is the big one. This is the crucial pivot point where everything starts to go sideways. According to the author, the leaders who've been getting all this public favor start to see their power in a totally new light. It's no longer a responsibility they have to the people. It becomes a right they've earned, a prize they've won for themselves. You see where this is going. Once you believe that power is your right, it almost always sours into self-righteousness. This is that dangerous belief that we, and only we, know the right way forward, and if anyone disagrees, well, they're not just wrong, they're an enemy of the people. This belief then becomes the perfect excuse to reward your friends and silence anyone who gets in your way. And that leads us straight to the final, and what the author calls the inevitable stage, dictatorship. That self-righteous conviction that you're the only one who's right becomes a full-blown mandate for absolute control. The entire state is now a weapon to enforce your vision and to crush any and all opposition. The cycle is complete. The movement that was born from goodwill has now tragically recreated tyranny. So who's actually driving this whole process? The author is pretty clear. This is no accident. They argue that specific people, who they call villains, are consciously manipulating this entire cycle for their own personal gain. And the scariest part? They don't look like villains when they first show up. This right here is at the absolute heart of the author's warning. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who look like obvious monsters. No, they're the ones who are masters of disguise, using this appealing, friendly language of goodwill to hide what they're really after. The essay really does paint a chilling picture. This kind of figure, they're driven by personal ambition, not public service. They are experts at taking that public goodwill and twisting it into a weapon for themselves. They build an inner circle of die-hard loyalists, and this last one is key. They systematically burn the bridges behind them, making sure there's no way for society to go back once they've secured their power. But look, the author doesn't just point out the problem. They also offer up this really powerful metaphor for what a healthy alternative could look like. They contrast this vicious political cycle we've been talking about with the balanced, productive cycle that we see all around us in nature.
And wow, the contrast is pretty stark, isn't it? On one side, you've got this man-made cycle of decay we've been exploring, but on the other, you have nature's cycle, a process that has no shortcuts, where every single stage has a purpose. You get birth, then growth, then fruition, and then a necessary period of rest. It all leads to a healthy, sustainable outcome. The lesson the author pulls from this is pretty profound. A healthy society, just like nature, can't just skip steps. It has to be built on reciprocity. Goodwill has to be met with more goodwill, not exploited. Favor needs to be repaid with service to the people. And maybe most important of all, rights must always be balanced with duties and responsibilities.
So this all brings us to the essay's final, really urgent point. If these so-called villains are so good at being deceptive, how is a society supposed to recognize the danger before it's way too late?
And this is a tough pill to swallow, but the essay puts a lot of the responsibility on the public itself. That sweet mask of goodwill is just so appealing, so intoxicating, that people often willingly look the other way. They become active participants in their own downfall, cheering for the very figures who are twisting their hopes into chains.
And this is the author's final chilling thought. The manipulation is so masterful that by the time the masks finally come off, by the time the public sees the true face of the dictator, it's just too late. The escape routes are gone, the bridges have been burned, society is trapped. So we're left with this really critical question. The essay serves as this stark warning about a political trap that seems to repeat itself throughout history. It suggests the biggest threat might not be some obvious enemy, but a charismatic friend who's wearing a mask. And the challenge for all of us then is, can we learn to see what's actually behind that mask before it's too late to do anything about it?